I'm not pulling out of the driveway. We all know what that means. It's time for another Drive to Work at Home edition. Okay, we're talking about Unfinity, and I have a guest today. So Chris Mooney was my right-hand person from the very, very first day of exploratory design to the very last day of like the polish, which is the part after set design. And so I'm real excited to have Chris here to talk all about lots of individual cards. Hey, Chris.
Hello. Excited to be here. Yes, it was a very long journey. But it was so much fun working on this set. And I'm excited to talk about some of the fun behind the scenes stories of these cards.
Okay, so the first card we're going to talk about is called Octo Opus. So let me read the card, and then you will tell me the origin of Octo Opus. So 3 blue enchantment. When Octo Opus enters the battlefield, create a 4/4 blue Octopus Performer creature token named Contortionist with, at the beginning of your upkeep, you may fold this token in half. It becomes 2/2, then 1/1, half, and so on. Sacrifice Octo Opus, draw a card and an additional card for each of Contortionist's folds. Okay, where did this card come from, Chris?
Right, so very early on, like right from the start, you sort of gave us the pitch of what the flavor of the set was going to be. And, we made a list of what we thought would be fun tropes, from circus, carnival, theme park. And a contortionist was one that we, one day, I think George Fan and I were sitting around and we were like, contortionist, like that seems like a fun one. And in an unspace, of course, we were trying to think of, what are some silly ways to engage with that. So we thought, wouldn't it be funny if you actually folded something up really small, like physically representing the contortionist. And of course we were like, oh, well, in the past we have made cards where you have to rip them up and they've not been very popular. People don't like destroying their Magic cards. But we said, oh, well, what about a token? Because tokens, they're more replaceable, and you could use just a scrap of paper laying around to represent a token. So we got some tokens that were lying around the office, and we started folding them up and tried to see how many folds we can get and how small it could get. And so we were like, it's really fun to fold up a token, or people might make their own token out of a napkin and they start folding the napkin. So we thought it was really cute. We also thought it was cute to have the creature actually get like halved in size. We have access to fractional numbers in unsets. So we were like, oh, it should actually become like a half and so on and so forth. But the real challenge from a design standpoint was like, okay, you can fold your creature in half, but why would you want to do that? Like, why would it be fun to have a creature that gets smaller and smaller over time? And so we went through a couple of different iterations on what would be the bonus for actually folding the creature up more and more. We went through a couple of different iterations that were not great. I don't remember a lot of them. This last one, though, we were like...
well, I remember one. Let me explain one thing before we get to the final version.
Yeah.
I think originally it was a sorcery that made the token.
Right.
And so you just generated the token, and then everything kind of lived and breathed on the token itself.
Right.
And then this last version was, wait, maybe that's wrong. So how do we get to this last version?
Right, yeah, because it was, we figured out that having an enchantment that at some point you could cash in the enchantment was it was easier to remember. It was, less text on the token, so you could really get it small and you wouldn't have to read anything on it or something. So we ended up being like, the longer you can keep it in play, the more cards you can draw at some point. And so we thought that was fun. We thought that, we had a lot of fun folding up the token and seeing how many, like, you can, the thickness of a Magic token that comes out of a Magic pack, you can only get so many folds on there. But if you made a token out of a different kind of paper, you could potentially get even more if you can keep it alive that long. So,
well, we're working on the FAQ right now. I'm not sure whether we're going to let you have other pieces other than a token. So,
okay, all right. Well,
yeah.
But we also, if I'm not mistaken, did get a special token printed for this card. Is that correct?
Yes, we did. In fact, the story behind that's kind of fun. So the idea is in order to make this work, it had to be a double-sided token that every time you folded it, there was the card of the right size with the right power toughness on it. And this was a surprisingly hard concept to communicate. Like, I had numerous meetings where I was like drawing pictures on paper and trying to explain the this and that. And this also is the only double-sided token, right? There's no other double-sided token in the set. So, like, for example, I think there are some weird things about this token that we managed to do it, but there was a lot of challenges to it. And it was one of the things that I didn't 100% know, like, it was one of the cards that I thought might get cut right at the end because we couldn't pull off the token. And what we said was, if we can't do the token, we don't want to do this. Like, it has to have the token. That's crucial to what this card is. But everybody got on board and made it work, and it definitely was one of the weirdest tokens we've probably ever made. So
yes, I think it was a really cool token to like collect. Right, and you'll see it when the set comes out. But right, it's a 4/4 on one side, and then on the back it's like a half size 2/2, and then a further half-sized, 1/1, and so on and so forth. And so it's really cool.
Oh, there's one other thing we did with this card. Once we got the token made and we got signed off on the token, this card used to be a rare, and we moved it from rare to uncommon because we're like, we just want more people folding the token. So we moved it down to uncommon so we can we wanted the token showing up more, and we wanted people just literally folding it more because it was so much fun.
It is a lot of fun.
Okay, the next card we're going to talk about is called Juggletron. So Juggletron is 2 and a red. It's an artifact creature, clown robot, 0/4. Trample. Whenever Juggletron attacks, you may put an art sticker on it. Juggletron gets +3/+0 for each item in its art that's not touching Juggletron, another item, or the card frame.
Right. So this was a very early on design. So once we knew we were doing art stickers, there's a lot of art stickers matter in the set, just with all the different kinds of stickers. But I thought that art stickers were really fun because you could make cards that really cared about what's going on in their own art. So I remember I sat down and I designed a bunch of these, and then actually physically drew a bunch of images that we don't normally do this, but I was able to get the images into our internal database so that when we printed out playtest cards, it would actually have our hand-drawn sketches in there because what the art showed really mattered. And this was one of those. I've got a couple others. I think I show some in my preview article that I just wrote. But this, right, so the idea of there just kind of being a juggler, but there being a bunch of big empty space that you could put stickers in. That just felt really fun. Like, art stickers are already so fun as a way to customize the art of your card. But then having art that's specifically designed to be customized felt like a really cool, fun idea that, wouldn't really work in any other context.
Yeah, well, one of the things, so there's this card, and there's a card called Astraquarium, which are the two cards that you made a whole bunch. 2 ended up in the set, where kind of shape matters is the way I like to think of it.
Right.
Like, it matters. A lot of the cards, the stickers matter cause something stickered or cause it's a hat or something. But these cards, actually, literally the shape of them matters. And that's one of the things we were trying to do is make cards that make the things matter in different ways. And so Juggletron and Astraquarium, although ironically Juggletron wants as many small things as possible, and Astraquarium wants as many big things as possible. So they put Astraquarium, there's a crack you're trying to cover. So like they go in opposite directions. One wants really big stickers and one wants really small stickers. And the funny thing about Juggletron was Annie did the concepting, and I was really clear with Annie about how we needed lots of space so you could put the stickers. And then the art comes in, and Dawn, who's our art director, crops it so there's no space. Like she's like, oh, I don't need all this blank space. I'll just crop in on the robot. And I'm like, Dawn, no, we need the open space. And I had to go back and go, had to have her recrop it. Because she originally like cropped so tight you couldn't fit anything on it. Because she was like cropping out the empty space.
In normal Magic art, you don't want a lot of big empty spaces, nothing going on. But on this card, you do want a lot of big empty space with nothing going on.
Yeah, one of the challenges of doing art for this set, unlike almost any other set, is art matters mechanically in a way that just it doesn't. And so there are a number of cards where like I had to convey to Annie and to Dawn, like, okay, this physical element of the art, like it really matters. So that anyway, that Juggletron's one of those cards.
They were, one of the big ones in terms of that art thing was the hats, because hats are a theme, and there were a couple of cards that we had to say like, "Hey, could this have a hat?" or, you know, like this looks like it's wearing a hat, but it really needs to be a bigger hat so that everybody knows for sure. So it was very interesting art and design cooperation on this.
There's a point where the art comes in, when the art's finalized, where the set lead's allowed to go to the art director a little bit and go, oh, could we maybe tweak this one thing? And I used all my sort of tweaking art points on getting hats on white creatures, because white-black is our hat, our draft archetype. And black was fine, but white, there was a lot of, like, ambiguously hatted creatures, and I had to go back and go, could it be clear the park leader's wearing a hat, please? Stuff like that. So, okay, next up, this next one was a very contentious card. Surprise Party.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so let me read it. 2 in white, enchantment. When Surprise Party enters the battlefield, yell surprise and put onto the battlefield any number of printed clown robot tokens that aren't touching each other, that you hit on the battlefield before you cast Surprise Party, and that weren't spotted by an opponent before you cast Surprise Party. Robots you control get +1/+0 and have vigilance. Okay, talk about the origin of Surprise Party.
Right, so there's a couple of gags that sort of, at this point I would call running gags, where they're fun, popular ideas for uncards that we sort of try to bring back over and over. And this one is in the Cheaty Face space. So the original, not the original Unset, but the original Cheaty Face was in Unhinged. And then Unstable had an entirely normal Armchair. And both of those cards were cards where you hid them on the battlefield, and then you could surprise your opponent. Be like, haha, you didn't see it, but I snuck it on there. And so during, I think, Vision Design, we were like, let's make another card where you hide things, but what if this time you could hide more than one? We like the idea of, if you're really sneaky, you can get even more things into play than normal. And so that's where the idea of Surprise Party came about, which was you hide tokens, and then when you cast it, you get to put all the tokens onto the battlefield. But this was a very challenging card because we kept on discovering more and more different ways that it was too easy to get a bunch of tokens out. So, for example, I remember in a playtest, somebody just had a stack of tokens in their deck box, and they were like, haha, here they are. And so we were like, oh, that doesn't feel right. Or, like, you know, someone had, like, a bunch of them hidden, like, you know, all, like, right on top of each other underneath their playmat. And so we were like, the idea of this card is really fun. It's really fun to see, hey, how many can you hide? It's a push your luck thing, right? The more you hide, the greater chances that someone will find them. But we didn't. So, like, for example, that's where the rule about, oh, they can't touch each other came from, because that really made you start to hide them in different places rather than trying to stack them all on top of each other. But, you know, it took us a long time. We went through many, many, many iterations because we kept on finding little things that could really be annoying. But I remember that for me, I was very a really big defender of this card and really tried to make it work, because I just believed so strongly in the fun of, in a couple of those early playtests, people just like, surprise, and then you have like a bunch of tokens. It was such a great moment, and I was like, I think it's worth it to try and make it work, because it's so much fun when it actually does go off.
Yeah, so the very first time this card ever got played, I was playing Donald, who was our play designer in Vision Design, and he didn't know this card's existence. So like, he was completely unaware this card existed. And I believe I hit like 14 clowns. Where like, yeah, I mean, I went ahead of time. I knew I had it. I hit them, and then all game long, I was seeding them everywhere. And then this card, I agree. We were back and forth on, was this fun or was this not fun? The one big thing we did near the end is we kind of made it a card that if you're playing robots, look, you don't have to hide any robots. You can just, like, the robots get +1/+0 in vigilance. We added that in to say, hey, if you don't want to hide things, it's still worth playing in your robot deck. And that, you know, you don't have to play that mini game.
Right. That really helped a lot, because one of the main reasons that we were struggling with it was because it used to just be a sorcery that made the tokens. And it was like, okay, well, if they catch you, now that card just doesn't do anything, because they're aware. They know that you're hiding them. And so making sure that it had sort of like a default mode really helped it to be like, right, it raised the floor up a lot. And that meant that we could keep it alive, keep it in the set, and allow people to have those awesome moments. And yeah, I totally remember that. Like, I think that was really the time, Mark, that solidified, like, this card is awesome. Because, right, you were able to hide, like, one was under your deck box, one was under the playmat, one was under the deck. Like, then just figuring out, like, how can you hide them in different areas. That was really, and that was so much more fun than having them all in a stack. And I was like, we gotta save this card. I really want to fight for this card.
The other thing I remember is you were where I was hiding them and Donald wasn't. And you were trying not to laugh the whole time because, like, I just kept hiding them, and you were. So I remember. Anyway, that's the other thing. By the way, is the reverse of Octo Opus. I think the card started at uncommon, and I'm like, okay, let's make this a little less common a thing that happens. In some level, if it happens more infrequently, it's more fun, and so we moved it up to rare. So.
And we also, another thing that we did is, it wasn't always flavored this way, but at some point I was like, I think yelling surprise, not only is it just kind of like a fun flavor thing, but also it is actually relevant because if you yell surprise and you show all the tokens, everyone else who's like in your draft is like, they've got surprise party. And it sort of like changes the dynamic. And I thought that was really fun as well.
Okay, the next card to talk about is called Autograph Book. So it's an artifact that costs 2 generic mana. Autograph Book enters the battlefield with a page counter on it for each person who signed it. 3 and tap, remove a page counter from Autograph Book, draw a card. Okay, so I think this was your card, right?
Yes, this was my card. I think this is, it's a card that is incredibly near and dear to my heart. It's actually a very fun story about this card. So, back before, like, when I was very young, like, way before I worked at Wizards, I would, like, make my own custom cards just for fun as a hobby. And I, would be involved in various online, online forums back in the days when forums were the big thing. And there was there's a forum I was a part of that had a game where, they were like, here's a prompt and make some cards. And one time the prompt was, make some cards, make some silver border cards at the time. And so I love Disney and just theme parks in general. As a kid, I would always have these autograph books. And I really like this idea of just an autograph book that like actually physically got people to sign it. That seemed like a fun concept. It seemed like a fun thing in Magic. We do these tomes that draw you cards. And so just having one of those, but like it actually physically you got people to sign it. And then it would also kind of give people a way to, if you go meet your, favorite designer or your favorite pro player or your favorite content creator, you could have Autograph Book be the card that they sign for you. But I was, I was very young. I just like, this is a fun idea. So I made it. And it just stuck in my brain. I never thought that I would ever get a chance to make that a real card. But flash forward many, many, many years, and we're making an unset. And not only are we making an unset, we're making an unset that's flavored around theme parks. I was like, it's all come together like a many, many years journey, but now Autograph Book is a real deal, and I can, in the physical world, get people to sign it. And so, yeah, this is definitely a very special card for me.
Yeah, this card got made pretty early on, and I don't think it changed much. We might have fiddled with the cost or something, but it I think pretty much was what you made. It's brain to print, as we call it. This was very much sort of as you turned it in is what it ended up being.
Yeah, we played around a couple times, changing numbers or changing exactly what it did, but ultimately it kind of landed back in the original spot. And I'm excited to sign autograph books. I'm excited to get my autograph books signed by other people. I have and I've also got a bunch of playtest autograph books from all the drafts that we did in the office, where all the office people signed them. It's just a really fun card to play, both just having your friends all sign it or having like actual, notable people sign it. This one definitely has a special place in my heart. I'm really happy that we got to make it.
Okay, the next card, Myra the Magnificent. 2 blue-red, legendary creature, human performer, 2/4. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery from your hand, open an attraction. X and tap, exile target instant or sorcery card with mana value X from your graveyard and choose an attraction you control that doesn't have a midway counter on it. Put a midway counter on it. Whenever you visit that attraction, copy the exiled card. You may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. Okay, so Myra as a character got made very, very early on. In fact, Myra the Magnificent's Intergalactic Astratorium of Fun, I think was like one of the early name, like that name just stuck around forever.
Yeah. Yeah, so this was like straight out of the World Guide. It was basically like, the world building team and Don, who's the art director, they came up with this character. They're like, this is the founder of the park, the Walt Disney, if you will, of this, theme park, circus, amusement park. And so we knew we wanted to make it as a legend. And my big thing was that we were at that early stage. We didn't really know what we wanted our legends to do. We didn't know exactly what. But my big thing was that this is the founder of the park. She made the park. She's sort of invented all of the, different attractions and stuff. So I really think that she wants to have a heavy attraction theme. She wants to feel like she is creating, a theme park with all of these interesting things. The interesting thing about Myra is that in Limited, blue and red aren't the biggest attraction colors. Black is really the central point of attractions in the set. So my idea was basically, all right, we this character really feels blue-red based on the flavor and the story that we made for her. So how could we tie in something that blue-red tends to care about with attractions? And that's where the idea of instants and sorceries allowing you to open attractions, and then you sort of imprinting those spells back onto the attraction, so they start going off and make this crazy, really strong midway. That just seemed to come together really well. And we played around with various different, costs and whatnot. But I think that central idea of she makes a very unique midway that is, special because she's the one who created it. That stuck around.
Yeah, one of the things that's interesting is whenever you do a theme, you want to make sure there are legendary creatures that play in your mechanical themes, because you want commanders that people can sort of play around with. And one of the things we were very conscious in this set, there's 30 legendary creatures in the set. That's very high. And the reason for that is there's not actually that many uncommanders. There's not, unsets haven't had that many legendary creatures in them. And so we wanted to sort of push a little bit. And the neat thing about attractions are they're in a deck that aren't tied to color. There is no color identity for the attractions. So, Myra lets you play all the attractions. There's 45 different attractions. So, you can pick and choose which ones you want, obviously. But, you have a lot of options how you play Myra because you have access to all of them, even though she's only a blue and red card.
Right. And it was important that I really like the idea that she had some input that allowed you to open attractions, since, right, blue and red have slightly fewer attraction openers than maybe some other color combinations. So this way in Commander, you could really build a deck that had a lot of instants and sorceries and then use those as the ways to open attractions.
Right. You'll notice a lot of our, or not all of them, but we were conscious of making some legendary creatures that cared about attractions that made sure that they could open them, since there's only so many openers in the set, and especially per color. Okay, next up is Mobile Clone. So Mobile Clone costs 2 blue, 4 total, sorcery. Using a mobile device, take a picture of target creature. That device enters the battlefield as a token that's a photocopy of the pictured creature. Photocopies include auras, equipment, counters, and stickers in the shot. Don't touch other people's phones without permission, and be careful if you do. Where did Mobile Clone come from? This is another card of yours, I think.
Yes. So this card... So I guess early on in exploratory, you sort of were telling us about the various things that we wanted to do in the set. We knew at the time what the theme was. We knew at the time that we wanted to use stickers. But one of the other things that you said to us was, hey, we should consider the fact that almost everybody nowadays has a mobile device, a cell phone, normally a cell phone, but it could be a tablet or something else. But most people have mobile phones, smartphones nowadays. We should consider that available to us in our realm of design. And so we actually went through a good number of different, phone-based designs. Not a lot of them ended up sticking. There's 2 big ones that, I can recall. But so the idea for Mobile Clone was basically, we had this idea of an uncard, a clone that copies everything about a creature. And that's something that a lot of players sort of, when they play a clone, if they're just starting out, if they don't know the rules, they sort of tend to think, oh, well, my creature has +1/+1 counters on it. Doesn't my clone have that size boost? Oh, my creature has an aura on it. Does it get the things from that? And that's not how the rules of normal Magic work. But we thought it would be cool to make an uncard clone that did count all of those things. And so really that idea of a clone that counted everything and the idea of phones now being available sort of came together to make this card. It's like, oh, how will you remember all this stuff? What if you just took a picture? Hey, if you take a picture, what if you just use your phone as the actual card itself? And so really the blending of those two ideas came together really well to create this card.
Yeah, there's a lot of controversy about cards like this. Like I said, and we'll talk about the other phone card in 1 second. There's only 2 cards that ended up sort of being phone cards. And there's a third card that's a social media card, but...
Sure, right, yeah.
But there's a lot of talk about, is this a good idea or bad idea? In the FAQ, you are allowed to draw a picture. Like, if you don't have a phone, you can draw a picture of it. It's not nearly as endearing as taking a picture with your phone. But you don't have to have a phone. But there's a lot of controversy about, like, should we make a card? Not everybody has a phone, although most people have a phone. We ended up making this rare, and we limited how many cards we did. But we thought it was such a cute card, we left it in. And then we spent a lot of time on the reminder text about, like, how do people handle other people's phones and stuff like that.
Yeah, we definitely made sure that the phone cards were at higher rarities so that they didn't show up all the time. But there is just something that's so fun about taking a picture with your phone, putting your phone on the table, and, like, I attack you with my phone. Like, it's a really, like, kind of visceral, fun experience. So I'm glad that, right, unsets have, this is true of the phones, it's true with dexterity cards, it's true with die rolling, but unsets have some mechanics that not everyone is a huge fan of, but hopefully they will be able to find something in the set that they enjoy.
Okay, so let's talk about the other phone card just because while we're on the phone topic. So this is Phone a Friend, 3 blue, sorcery. Call someone and ask them to choose one. If they don't answer, an opponent chooses one. Don't explain anything else. You choose targets. A, gain control of target creature you don't control. B, choose target creature you control. Create 2 tokens that are each copies of it. C, take an extra turn after this one. D, draw 7 cards. So this is another of your, I believe this is another one of yours.
Yes. This is my sort of brain to print card for this. I mean, there's a couple of others that stayed the same, but this one I very distinctly remember. This one and like Annie's animate object are 2 where it's like, this is from exploratory and it survived all the way. But right, so the mobile clone came about sort of over time with the phone idea. But this card was immediately, like when you said phones are on the table, I was like, we have to make a card where you call someone. It's just such a fun idea for, like outside assistance is something that, people already do. And I've played a lot of games of Unstable where someone will, call up their friend to ask them if they like squirrels or something. And so I really like the idea of like sort of formalizing it as like the flavor of the card is you call someone. And, in terms of, I was like, okay, so you call someone. So then what does that do? Like, why would you call them? And to me, just the very obvious, answer was the classic, like, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire lifeline phone a friend, where you call someone, you give them the options, and then they sort of just have to give you their best guess. And what's really fun about this card is that you can phone someone who, is really into Magic. You can phone someone who doesn't know anything about Magic. Just like in Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, when you phone a friend, sometimes they know exactly, what the answer is, and sometimes they have no idea and they just make a best guess. But I was really enamored with this. I remember we played it that first. You want to tell the story of the first time we cast it and explored?
Yeah. So the first time we cast it, I get the card. So I call my wife Laura, who many years ago played Magic, but hasn't played Magic in ages. And I believe if she picks A, I win the game. But I'm not allowed to tell her what's going on, and she doesn't know Magic. Like, it's not really a thing that even to explain to her. And I'm like, I'm just sitting here like, she can't hear me, but I'm like, A. And then she ends up picking C, I think, take an extra turn. And I'm like, no! And like everybody started laughing. And I put it on speaker so that everybody in the room could hear it. And it was one of those moments where like, the second that happened, I'm like, how do we not make this card? Like, it just, like, everybody stopped and was focused on, like, we had multiple games going on, and every game stopped so they could hear my wife say what she was going to do, It was just, It's like kind of when Annie attacked with the hand sanitizer, with there's just moments where something happens, you're like, okay, we're printing this card. And that was like, once that happened, I'm like, I don't know how we're not printing this card.
Yeah. So I agree. Like, that was such a special moment. I was like, I made the card. I wasn't sure. I thought it would be fun, but it turned out to be so awesome. This is a card, though, that like is also a good example of where sort of the game design of Unset comes in. Because it's like, okay, cool. You call someone up, they choose options. That's a really fun idea for a card. But it took us a long time to get, like, the exact stuff right. Like, there's 4 options, and trying to make sure, when we picked these options, we tried to make sure that they were things that someone without a lot of Magic knowledge could understand, right? So the idea of take an extra turn, draw 7 cards, gain control of something. These are things where if you haven't played Magic, you might be able to understand what that means. Like, take an extra turn, like, You've played a board game probably where you take an extra turn. That's pretty strong. Drawing 7 cards, that's a lot of cards. But also things like, we made it so that if they don't answer, your opponent picks. That was a thing of like, if they don't pick up, like, we don't want you to call another person and just stall the game out. So having your opponent choose, I mean, they're all still quite strong. So even if you get the worst one, like, that's still an okay card to cast. But it was a lot more fun to just skip ahead and keep the game moving. Don't delay by calling people over and over again.
Okay, so we have one last card to talk about before we have to wrap up for today. And this might be one of the cutest cards in the set. Carnival Barker. So 2 in a red for a creature, dog employee, 3/3. Tap. You have 30 seconds to laud a creature you control to any people outside the game. Until end of turn, that creature gains trample and haste and gets +X+0, where X is the number of those people who applauded. Activate only as a sorcery and only once. So I think this was my card, right?
Yeah, so I think from very early on, the idea of a Carnival Barker, of like, it's a Carnival Barker, but it's a dog. Everyone was like, of course, what a cute idea, we have to do that. And I remember, though, that we were like, okay, for sure this card is in the set, we're definitely going to make it. But it took us a long time to figure out what it should do. I remember for a while, it was kind of like an MC variant, MC being an older unhinged card, but it was like when a creature showed up, you would like top it up or something. MC was an unhinged,
and ironically, if MC had not been made, we might have just done MC for the Carnival Barker, but because MC existed, I was really enamored. The thing that ended up making this design was, what does a Carnival Barker do? And I'm like, well, his job, the job of a Carnival Barker is to get you to come see the thing that they want you to see. They're trying to sell you on, ooh, this is an amazing thing, come watch it. And so I'm like, well, how do we duplicate that in a Magic game? And that's what came up with the idea of, well, what if you're trying to get people to applaud it? What if you're trying to get people, invested in it? And, originally, I think you could use this card multiple times. Like, okay, that's just too much. We'll just make it once.
So I remember basically my contribution to this design basically being that at some point we figured out, okay, like, what if, like, you're trying to get people to come look and, there are versions where it's like you're trying to get someone to pick it up, like, so they could look at the card and be excited, or you're trying to get, and I think that we were bouncing a lot of ideas around in this space, and at some point, the exact text on this card, I think, came from me, where I was like, all right, you can only do this exactly once in the game, because it's very repetitive and annoying to try and get people to come over and over and over again. But the idea of someone shows up and it's like, all right, this is my one chance. I'm going to do my best performance, try and get as many people to show up as possible and get this one huge attack on. Right, so like the thing about, like, you can only activate it once, 30 seconds. There's a scaling reward with the number of people who applaud. So, even if you always get haste and trample, but if you can, even just 1 or 2 people applauding, is like, all right, that's a little bonus. And I think once we landed on this design, we were like, this was the most fun version, where it was really focused on, instead of every creature or every turn, it's like just one time per game. Of course, there's occasionally times where it gets bounced or something, but for the most part, you're not doing it as often, which I think one of the things that we've noted about a lot of these cards in the past, like the same thing is true with Phone a Friend, and it's why it's a mythic, is that there are things that are really fun to do, but they're not fun if you do them over and over again in every game. Or even just like, if it happens a couple times over the course of the night, like that's the peak fun, is that it only happens every so often. And so for a lot of these cards, we put them at rare and tried to make them more powerful so that they wouldn't show up in as many drafts, you wouldn't draw them as often, but when you did, you would have a good time.
Yep. And with that, I guess we'll have to wrap up for today. So I've made it back to my desk, or I made it to my desk. But thanks. I want to thank you, Chris, for being with us. Like this set took a long time to make, more so than the normal set. It had a longer everything, basically. And so it is fun finally talking about it. And I'm glad, and like, you and I worked on it forever. So it's fun to discuss all the different ideas with you.
It's so nostalgic now. It's like when I see the cards, it's like, oh, I remember back in the day when we made this card.
So anyway, thank you so much for being with us, Chris.
Thanks for having me.
And everybody else, I'm now at my desk. So we all know what that means. It means at the end of my drive to work. So instead of talking magic, it's time for me to be making magic. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.